Why am I here? If I had a dime for every time someone asked me that question, I would have a lot of dimes. The recently bereaved, the very elderly, the terminally ill, the unloved, the unwelcomed, the unmoored among us. Years ago, a friend's husband and only grandchild were killed in a car accident from which she emerged the sole survivor. Her husband and grandson were buried in the same casket, Roger cradling young Friedrich in his lifeless arms. And for months, if not years, my friend wandered through her days, asking even strangers, "Why am I here?" She could no longer imagine a purpose to her life, burdened as she was with grief and with guilt. "Why am I here?" is the refrain of the saddest song ever written. I am only this week returning from what was to have been a 3-week vacation with my husband and my dog, but was instead a time of grateful grieving the death of my mother, who died 2 days shy of her 89th birthday 3 weeks ago this morning. But our grieving for her began long ago as she slowly stopped being the mom we knew. My mother, Troyce Post, was a woman of her time, beautiful, smart, kind. Had she been born in a different generation, perhaps in my generation, she might have made different choices. She might have gone to college. She might have had a career. She might have moved off the farm. But none of those choices were available to her. Instead, she fell in love and married the boy on the next farm over, never living more than 4 miles from the place where she was born. My mother's life was defined by her roles. She was wife, she was mother, she was farmer, neighbor, sister, daughter, friend, grandmother. And she performed each of these roles with graceful expertise, never letting on how terribly tired she must have been. I remember as a child thinking that my mother never got sick. But then I had children of my own, and I realized she probably got sick as often as anyone else, but there was no time for her to take a day off. I remember the day the last of us 8 kids went off to college. We were all so worried about my mother. She was our mother. That was all she was. She was our mother. What would she do without a child in the house? I called her about 10 o'clock that morning, and she picked up the phone and said, "And you are number 5. She laughed. "I know you kids are worried about me, but I'm fine. Just finishing a cup of coffee and the crossword. Go back to work." And though her responsibilities had shifted and her burdens eased, they continued to define her, and happily so. But a few years ago, she no longer lived in her own home. She no longer made her own meals. She no longer woke up to the boy next door. And she started asking that awful question, "Why am I here?" We struggled to answer her, since we too wondered what her life meant when all those tasks that gave her such joy, all those responsibilities were taken from her. Please forgive my preoccupation with these recent memories. I don't want to presume on your kindness and patience, but of course, many of you have a therapist. I have you. And I don't know that would have spent this much time talking about my mom, except that the texts handed to us for this day ask the very question so many have asked before us, the question that haunts so many whom we love. Why am I here? In this morning's gospel reading, Jesus is assaulted by a person in the crowd who wants to draw him into a personal dispute. Jesus, Jesus, the man shouts, jumping up and down from the crowd. My older brother is a rotten so-and-so. Tell him how to divide my father's estate. How do I know the man asking this question was the younger brother? How do we know the estate would be divided in a lopsided fashion? Well, it's easy. The law was clear. The oldest son in a first-century family was automatically executor of the estate and primary beneficiary of all of the family's wealth. The younger brother and any other siblings would have to fight over the scraps. The older brother would have had no interest in an alternative legal opinion. The law was on his side. So clearly, Jesus' questioner was on the losing side of probate court. So Jesus, perhaps irritated that the man's concern about his dead father was not his father, but his father's wealth, brushed him aside and said, "Ask your attorney." But then, recognizing that more lay beneath that question, Jesus turned to the whole crowd, a crowd populated by both older and younger siblings, by rich farmers and poor farm hands. "Look out," Jesus said to them. "It is far too easy to be possessed by one's possessions." And then he told them a story. At first hearing, Jesus' point seems clear. Don't you just hate rich people? But we need to listen more closely. Jesus makes no judgment on this smug farmer's wealth. Both wealth and poverty are morally neutral. Both wealth and poverty are circumstances of life, not measures of character. I know people, as do you, both rich and poor, who are generous, kind, humble. I also know people, as do you, both rich and poor, who are selfish, mean-spirited, and small. Jesus did not begrudge the farmer a great yield in a booming agricultural market. It's what every farmer wants, and what all of us who eat the product of their labor need to live. Jesus is not troubled that the man has had a great harvest or that he's putting a whole bunch of people to work by building new buildings. Jesus is concerned that the man saw his good fortune as good fortune only for himself. "Why am I here?" the smug farmer asked himself in his lazy boy that night. And since there was no one in the cavernous house to talk to, he answered himself, "I know why I'm here. Bigger barns, better cigars, beefier steak." And in a dramatic shift from Luke's pattern with the parables, the moral of the story is rendered not by Jesus, but by God. It's like being called to the principal's office. "You fool! Tonight is the night you die. And since you care for no one and no one cares for you, what good comes of your good fortune?" To which Scooby-Doo would say, "Ruh-roh." The not quite dead yet farmer had imagined the answer to "why am I here" to be strictly financial. I'm guessing Jesus would have us answer that another way. Jesus' disciples live lives for the other. Jesus' disciples give away more than we keep. Jesus' disciples view the world not as a trophy to be earned, but as a field to be tended. I remember once about 9 months ago when my mother was still modestly conversant, when she looked at me and said, "Why am I here?" And though I am a grown-up woman and a trained theologian and a responsible citizen, I gave a little girl's answer. I said, "You're here because I need you." It was such a selfish answer, such a frightened answer. Why are we here? Each of us, not just in this room, but in this world. We are way beyond frightened, selfish, small answers to the enormous questions that occupy the world. Are we here because we need each other so we feel better? Is it for bigger barns and better steaks and beefier cigars? I mixed those up, but you understand what I meant. No, Jesus' disciples answer that question differently. Why are we here? Well, first and foremost, we are here to praise God. That's why we were made. We are here to love the neighbor, especially the neighbor who frightens us. We provide food for God's children, blessings for God's people, and love that showers the land.